Hello, everyone. Welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Aaliyah Langley, and award season is in full swing. The film award season. This is the time where I started my YouTube channel. Where we started back up again last year, and it is in full swing here. And I thought it'd be good to talk about my favorite movies of 2024. If you've been following, you know that I make 1 minute movie reviews on almost every new movie I see. There's only a few that don't get a 1 minute movie review. So, and I have my letterbox. I track all my movies religiously on there. You could follow me there if you'd like. It'll be linked below. But I really like movies. I'm a big movie person. I consider myself a cinephile, and I want to talk about my favorite movies of 2024, as there's been several good ones. So that's where I'm at. I have a list of 15 movies. As I share them to you, I'm not going to share them in order or anything like that. I don't necessarily have an order of what I like the most or not, or things like that. Some I might have seen more than others. Others I might have only seen once. Others I might have seen 5-6 times. But they are standouts for me for the year, and I'd like to share them with you all. As I'm going through them, if I could link it in a moment, or I'll just link it below, I'll do both potentially. I'll put my 1 minute movie review on it there, so that way you could see my thoughts on it, which I record those either the day I see it, the day after, or a couple days after. Just kind of depends. So you can get my quick thoughts there if you haven't seen those. And also I will note, I will be going through the movies in full. So if you haven't seen the movie and you want to maybe see the movie, certain movies might have like a spoiler element. I could think of maybe one or two that might have like a little bit of like a moment. So I'll be talking about the movie completely. So if you'd like to see the movie first before hearing my full thoughts, check out the 1 minute movie review first and then go see it, or come back later. Just do whatever you want to do in terms of what works for you. I'm trying to see if I have anything else I need to check off my box. Yeah, one other thing to say. I believe one or two of the movies were technically 2023 movies, but maybe they didn't release in the United States until 2024, or I saw them like in the beginning of 2024, like January. Like I said, I think I have one or two of those. I think it's mostly a thing of like they didn't release in the United States until 2024, so that's obviously when I was able to see them. So all right, let's jump right in. The first movie, as I said, we're going alphabetical order here. The first movie on my favorites of 2024 is Anora, written and directed by Sean Baker. Anora is the film. Mikey Madison is playing the title character here, Anora, or she goes by Annie in the film. And I saw this for the first time, I believe, on October 31st. It had been a movie. I was so excited to see it. Won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in the summer. This is actually Neon's, the entertainment company. This is their fifth Palme d'Or win in a row. They won for, might not be in order here, but they won for Titane, Anatomy of a Fall, which was last year, Parasite, Triangle of Sadness, and now Anora. So 5 in a row for them. Really, really great to be in Neon at the Cannes Film Festival. So I was so excited to see it. I had all this anticipation, and it was finally rolling out to cinemas, and I jumped on the ticket right away as I saw it. And went to see it, and seeing it right away, I was just like, oh, this is absolutely blows me away. I mentioned this in my 1 minute movie review. It's a movie. Let me back up actually. So the film is about Anora, or Annie, a sex worker who Mikey Madison plays, who basically falls in love with the son of a Russian oligarch, and they get married in this kind of fast way, and then everything comes crumbling down when his family finds out that he married a sex worker, and they basically come and like try to like dismantle this union essentially and get it annulled and do this whole thing. And she's dealing with like, am I actually loving this guy? Like, am I just like, was this just like a hustle at first, or like what are the things? She's obviously growing feelings for him, and she's kind of holding on to this dream life that she kind of like starts having for a couple weeks. Then it all kind of crumbles. The film though really lands, for most people, they say it really lands in the last few minutes. There's this incredible scene. It's like 3 minutes potentially, where everything is over. We've gone through this whole ordeal with everybody. There's a whole really kind of terrifically shot and just terrifically like organized. Like I think it's a 28-minute scene where they do a home invasion essentially, where the Russian oligarchs, like people who work for him, come into the house and like basically try to split up Yvonne and Annie, and Yvonne runs off, who's the husband, and Annie is there and trying to fight for herself, and they go on this like wild goose chase trying to find her husband essentially so they can get the marriage annulled and all these things. So there's this whole crazy ordeal. She meets the parents, they get it annulled in Vegas. There's this up and down, and Yura Borsev, who is the other character, Mikey Madison and Yura Borsev have been getting a lot of praise for their roles in getting nominated several places, as well as Sean Baker for the film and the writing and all these things. But there's a film of them in the car. Again, the whole ordeal is done. They're back in New York. He's a Russian guy, a gopnik is what they call him, which I think is kind of like a slang term for kind of like a low class or like middle class type person. I'm not 100% sure there, but he works for the family essentially, and has met Annie through this. He gives her the ring that Toros, who Karen Kargulian plays, stole from her when they invaded the house essentially. And they talk for a little bit, like barely, like the whole movie he's kind of like watching her, and after you see this movie like the first time and like you kind of look back and you're like just noticing things more. So he gives her this ring back and she's touched by it or whatever, and she's been holding on to all these emotions, and then she climbs on top of him, and they start to have sex essentially, but then she just starts breaking down crying because she's pushing off any intimacy. He tries to kiss her and she's just like completely pushing it off because it's just like, I think I don't know, I think there's so much the filmmakers have specifically like not talked about like what happens after, or what did that moment mean, or all these things. I think it's one of those very good discussion pieces, and people have all different types of ideas of the film, but it's this very like tender moment where it's just like you're there, there's no talking, you're just there. And I would really recommend you watching if you haven't seen it, which if you haven't seen it and you're watching this movie, you're watching this video, and you just don't care about the spoilers, I mean, that's fine, that's your decision. But it's just this, it just completely lands the movie and like gives it this like absolute gut punch. Because it's a very kind of like funny movie. When I saw it the first time, I wasn't like laughing a bunch and things like that, but people in the theater were like laughing a bunch, and I could have laughed, and there was certainly funny moments, but I was kind of just like in it and trying to like not necessarily laugh because nothing is funny to the people in the movie, even though what they're saying is funny on the screen. But through that whole kind of experience of people laughing and all this, having this levity and these kind of like good times, you're absolutely punched in the end when she's there absolutely bawling her eyes out after maybe it like kind of washes over her what she's gone through, and it's just like a fantastic film. It was easy quickly in my favorites of the year, like immediately after I saw it. I've seen it now a total of 5 times, 3 times in theaters, and then I've since bought the film. It just came out on digital a couple weeks ago, and I've seen it twice at home, and it's excellent. So that is the first film I want to talk about for 2024 that I really enjoyed. All right, moving right along is a film. I'm already hearing the score in my head as I'm about to say it. Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino. This movie I was excited to watch. One, because I'm a huge tennis fan, so there's already that element. Zendaya is someone who I feel like I've been like I don't want to necessarily call myself a fan, but she's been someone I guess maybe a fan. I'm not sure what the definition of fan necessarily is, but she's someone I follow, someone I see what she's been doing, and I'm a big fan of Euphoria. I've seen her in other projects, and so I was excited to see this, as well as Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist as well, who are the 3 of them are kind of like co-leads or all together in this. Challengers is about Zendaya is playing someone named Tashi Duncan, who essentially she's like this fierce competitor, fierce tennis player. She hurts her knee in college and ends up not being able to play tennis. And the movie's kind of like flashing back or coming in this whole kind of love triangle between Josh and Mike, who their names are Patrick and Art. Josh is Patrick, Art is Mike. They were all kind of friends for a little bit when they were like younger. She dated Josh or Patrick's for a little bit, and then she ended up marrying Art later. And now she's Art's coach, and Patrick is not in tennis anymore. He's trying to do, but he's like really like falling off the wagon here, and it's like this whole like love triangle between the 3 of them, and like trying to figure out like what's going on here essentially. I think it's just a really kind of great ride, and kind of like the way everything is laid out, from the way it's shot, from like the story of it, from being able to follow these characters. Like I said, obviously the tennis piece is a plus for people like me. But I don't know, it's just like a fun movie. An interesting movie, one that kind of keeps you on your toes, and you don't really know what's going to come next a lot of the times. I remember seeing it and being really happy to see it. I remember the first time I saw it, the movie was starting, and like midway through, like it like stopped, they like got frozen or something like that, and it was like frozen for like 15 minutes or something. It was like really like jarring a little bit, and then they finally fixed it, and I've seen it a total of 3 times, 3 times all in theaters, I believe. And yeah, I really like that movie. Luca Guadagnino, I think, was a great director. I've seen his past several films, and I really, really enjoy his work, and I think he was a good pick for this movie. And like I said, I already hear the score in my head as I just thought about it. It's a great score, and that's a score that's been winning some awards. It just won a Golden Globe, and it's been in a lot of awards conversations as well. So very, very good stuff. All right, moving right along is the third movie I'm going to talk about for 2024 that I really enjoyed. Is Conclave, directed by Edward Berger. I actually am about to read this book. I just got the Kindle from Libby, from my library, and so I'm excited to read this book. This is a book. Conclave is like a private meeting, and specifically in the Roman Catholic Church, it means like a private meeting where the cardinals come to elect the next pope. So the film starts, the Pope has died. Ralph Fiennes is like a close companion of the Pope, as well as like Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow. They're all there essentially, and Ralph Fiennes kind of becomes like the person who like has to lead this conclave, bringing in all these popes from all over the world, and they're sequestered and have to decide the next pope. So you're kind of dealing with the dramatics of these men who are like ambitious, some people who don't want to be the Pope but maybe are getting votes, people who are. It's just this mix of, it's a very male situation. Then Isabella Rossellini is playing a nun who has this great like moment in the film where all these dramatics are happening and these cardinals are lying to each other, and they're doing all these kind of backdoor shady things. And she like in the middle of this like cafeteria room says like, and I'm supposed to just be here just to like listen and just to kind of like serve the food and like move along, but I have ears and I have eyes. And she basically calls out, by not necessarily naming she didn't name a pope, a cardinal, and says like, he did this, like you're right about this, and all these things. And it's just this fantastic moment, and the whole thing is just like, again, it's one of those like you're on the edge of your seat, like you're watching this unfold. I didn't know much about the Roman Catholic Church or much about like some of these, like how they do all this stuff, so it was just very beautiful. They like rebuilt the Sistine Chapel. It's such a beautifully shot film. If I can stitch some like some shots from the movie that I remember seeing it and just being like, whoa, this is stunning. Like I was like thinking like, who is the director of photography here? This is like gorgeous. The outfits, also the costume designer, the outfits are just so regal and so beautiful. And it was such a great movie. So all that's going on, but then also at the very end of the movie, there is someone who is a cardinal who says he was elected to be a cardinal, or chose to be a cardinal by the last pope who just died. He lives in, I think he lived in Afghanistan. He's from Mexico or somewhere in South America. I don't remember. I believe somewhere in South America. But he's a pope he's like a pope of Afghanistan, which is like, he has to, he's like undercover though, because I mean, for obvious reasons, you don't necessarily want to be yelling about being a cardinal. I keep saying a cardinal in Afghanistan. So he kind of comes, and they're like, is he an actual, okay? And he comes into this conclave right before they get sequestered, and he's very like, man who's like very much like sure of himself and sure of his faith and all these things. And an attack happens essentially, and a pope who's very like more conservative and is trying to like get rid of some of the progress potentially that the last pope has made. This cardinal is very like conservative, is very like trying to be hard charging on these things, and this pope from Afghanistan stands up and gives this incredible speech like to kind of counter. And after all these votes, where they're not able to like choose a pope because they have like a majority, everyone votes for him. And at the very end of the scene of the film, there's like this like huge kind of reveal where he's sitting in there, and there's been some questions where Ralph Fiennes is playing, like I said, he's the head of the conclave. So he's getting these details because some people had to be like not considered to be the next pope because some of the shady things they did. They found out that this pope had an operation, or maybe he had an operation, he canceled the flight, didn't end up going. And at the end, he finds out why he had, like what the operation was going to be for. And essentially the person who they chose to be the next pope is intersex, was born with female parts, seemingly female parts inside, because he says like at the end, like I grew up like any other normal boy, and it wasn't until I had an appendectomy, which you get your appendix out, that I found out, I have like female parts essentially. And in the film, he doesn't necessarily, he says it obviously and later, but he just says like, I canceled the hysterectomy. And right away, women know what that is right away, or some men who just know more about women's bodies. And then sometimes men, it's like, and it takes them another like 2 seconds or 3 seconds to like get it. But it's like one of those moments like, and I remember when it happens in the film, he says it, he says the word hysterectomy, and then the film is just like, I mean, there's still like the sound of going on, but it's just silent. Ray Fiennes' just character is just there, just like steps back and just takes it in. He doesn't say anything, and everyone's just like quiet. And the whole theater was like, like literal gasps. I've seen the film twice now, both times in theaters, and every time it's just like a literal, just like. And then, because they're doing this whole thing of trying to figure out, do we want to have a more conservative pope? Do we have a more liberal pope? All these things, and then you end up electing a pope who is intersex, and like what that would look like and all those things. It's just an incredible movie. So for all the things I said, there's so much to it as well. Like I said, I don't have the speech on top of my head that he gave towards the end that ended up getting him elected as pope, but the speech he gave was so incredible. And I look forward to reading the book. As I said, I'm sure it was laid out well in there, and kind of like how we got to stop separating ourselves and bring ourselves together, and that's really what got him the job. And yeah, great movie. Obviously one of my favorites because I'm talking about it right now. But yeah. All right, next movie on the list is Dìdi by Sean Wang. This movie, as soon as I saw this movie, again, was one of those immediate. All of these pretty much are pretty much ones that immediately I was like, oh yeah, this is like immediately one of my favorites. But this one for sure, I saw this in the summer time-ish or something. I don't remember exactly, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Let me see when I saw it first. I saw it first in August, on August 3rd. This is like a coming-of-age drama, essentially. We're following, Dìdi means younger brother or little brother in Mandarin. And we're following this little boy who Isaac Wang plays, who is coming of age in the Sacramento, San Francisco. I think it's like Sacramento, California, like that kind of area of California. And it's the summer before he goes into high school. He's 13 years old. He's dealing with like girls. He's dealing with his friends. He's dealing with trying to like find himself. His sister is going off to college. All these things happening. It's just this beautiful coming of age story. And it hit me it's hit me right away, essentially. Sean Wang, and it's very much set like it could be Sean Wang potentially. I wouldn't say it's autobiographical or anything like that, but the character, I believe, in the movie is like 2 years older than me, like me in real life, in terms of like they were born in this year and I was 2 years after them. So there's very much things like MySpace, which I never had, or I was a little bit too late for that curve maybe, but things like MySpace are there, so it's like also one of those films where it's like kind of through the screen in some capacity, and a lot of the things that were going on that I can remember, like, oh yeah, I remember that being a thing, like when we were growing up, like AOL Messenger, or like random bits like that, like, so it's very like millennial, very like in that pocket, and he's trying to be a filmmaker. He's like doing these skate videos. Like I said, he's just kind of figuring himself out, figuring out how to talk to girls, figuring out how to be a friend, figuring out like how to not piss off his mom. It's such an excellent movie, and it hit me so hard when I saw it, and I was really just like, wow, this is a movie like any like it says here, for anyone who's ever been a teenager. So it's one of those, everyone's been a teenager, either if you are one now or if you were one however many years ago. Everyone's been there and knows what that kind of period is like, and it brought me right back to kind of that period, and I really just like loved the film. And Joan Chen, who plays his mother, was absolutely fantastic in this movie. There's a scene towards the end where they've had this falling out, her and her son, and he comes back home the next day, and he sits on the bed, and they're just talking, and she's saying, like, you and your sister are my dream. Like, I sacrificed it to get you guys this dream, and all these things. She's just she's so good in it. I've seen she's gotten a couple like award nominations or things like that, kind of on smaller, but it's just fantastic. One that I can't like. This is one that's probably like my strong. If I had to like pick a favorite, potentially it's one of my very strong, like, we're top of the charts here on my favorites of 2024. Yeah, very, very good. Also, I'm going to attach in here. I remember after seeing the movie, Sean Wang had posted before the movie came out, essentially, like, or as it come out, kind of like a message to people who were seeing Dìdi, or kind of like his intentions for the film. And I remember I read it afterwards, and I was just like, oh, you hit like this, like bang on, like you were. This is what you did, and you were incredible. And yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's one of those movies where for my 1 minute movie review, sometimes a minute's not enough. So on TikTok, before it's about to be taken away potentially, on TikTok a lot of times I would like post like a follow-up video talking more about the movie. If I had to talk about a specific performance or talk about a specific something about the movie that I want to talk about more than a minute, I would do. And I remember I did one on Dìdi, and I like shared it all over the place because I was like, this was a good movie. I really wanted people to see it. So that's a great one. Alrighty. Next on my list is the movie I believe I've seen the most times out of everything on this list. And that is Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. I've seen this movie 6 times. All, I think, 5 times in the theaters and then once at home. Which, this is the kind of movie, like, watching it at home, I don't have, like, this massive, massive TV. Even if no one has an IMAX TV in their house. So it's never going to be, like, as great as that. But this is one of those movies where it's, like, watching at home doesn't always do it justice because it's one of those massive scale movies. And I'm a person who likes to go see movies multiple times in theaters if I really enjoy it. Obviously, I went 5 times to go see Dune Part 2, and I really liked it. I remember before I saw Dune Part 2, I'd seen Dune a couple times in the theaters and whatever, but they had Dune back in the theaters like the week before or 2 weeks before Dune Part 2 came out. And I went, and so many people, it was like a packed theater. I remember everyone was so excited. And then, coming back the week later to see Dune Part 2, and it was just excellent. I haven't read these books, or this book. This is Dune Part 1 and Part 2 are all from one book. I don't think I necessarily will. I've never been like a sci-fi person, but when I saw this movie, the first one in 2021, it sounded interesting enough. People were in it who I liked. I was like, let's give it a chance, and I ended up really liking it. And Dune Part 2 was even better. It has Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Léa Seydoux, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, so many other people, like Anya Taylor-Joy makes a kind of a sneak appearance in there as Paul Atreides' brother. It's just a great movie. Like, I don't even know what more to say in terms of like I said, the scale of it. It's beautifully shot. The story was compelling. It's a lot more action-packed than the first Dune. There's going to be a next one, Dune Messiah, which I believe starts filming later this year, and that'll come out in a couple years. It was just really a great ride, all kind of about Paul Atreides, who is like Timothée Chalamet's character, was like the prince of his people, who like they were kind of like wiped out essentially, and now he's living in the desert with Zendaya and the gang essentially, and he basically rises to become this like leader of the Fremen people, who are Zendaya's, who is Chani, her people essentially, and he basically fights back against this like emperor and these people who like killed his father and killed his people in the first movie. And he's kind of like turning, and Denis Villeneuve talks about how Frank Herbert, who wrote the books, has talked about how some people have looked too much as Paul Atreides as like this actual messianic figure, which he didn't want to happen. So Dune Messiah is kind of like believe more so kind of targeted about like maybe Paul Atreides getting too big in the head, or like maybe like what happens when you have like when you make messianic figures out of people and how that's not like what you need to be doing. So I'm looking forward to that. It's just a really great movie. Like, I don't know. Obviously I liked it a lot. I saw it multiple times in the theaters, and I wouldn't take back a single time I saw it because it was a solid pick for me. All right. Next up on my list is Exhibiting Forgiveness. That is directed by Titus Kafour. This is a smaller movie that I don't even remember how this came into like my head or like where I saw it. I guess I see a lot of movies anyway, so I'm usually scrolling and looking out for things like that. But Andra Day is in it. Andre Holland are two. Ingenue Ellis Taylor, who every time I talk about Ingenue Ellis, she I believe is one of our greatest actors at this time. She is like so fantastic. And this is a movie all about Titus Kafour. Is basically like he's a painter in real life, and this is kind of like autobiographical. It's about his trying to find freedom from his past, and he's the Andre Holland in the film is an artist. Andra Day is a musician in the film. Actually, this beautiful song she wrote while filming the movie called Bricks, and that her character is actually like writing this actual song in the movie. It's a very interesting kind of thing. But Andre Holland is struggling with, he had a father who was not there for him essentially, and it was just kind of always like it's kind of trying to like pop back in his life. and Angelou Ellis Taylor is his mother, and she ends up like getting really sick in the end. He's like dealing with that. His dad's around, and he's trying to figure out like, I don't want to necessarily like forgive you, bro. Like, you like were not there for me. You weren't there for my mom. All these things, and it's just this beautiful film that I think so well represents so many people's experiences with maybe like losing a parent, like not necessarily by them dying, but maybe them walking out of them not being there as much. It's an excellent film, and when I saw it right away, I was like, oh, I need to send this to some people to go see this. I think this is really good in terms of maybe reflecting their personal life or things like that. And I thought it was so great. I've only seen it once. I wanted to go back to the cinema to see it, but I didn't. And it's not one of those movies that's on any streaming services. Like I said, it's smaller. I'm not sure who the distributor is. But it's a beautiful movie, and I really encourage you seeing it if you can, buying it, or if it happens to come back out in theaters anywhere. Definitely see this movie. So good. All right. Next up on my list, what number are we on? 6 or 7? Is a British film. This is another one that technically came out in 2023, or the first one I'm talking about. So that came out in 2023, but I saw it in 2024, in the beginning of 2024. It is called Femme. It is directed by Sam H. Freeman and Ng Chun Ping. Like I said, a British film. It stars Nathan Stewart Jarrett and George McKay. George McKay, people would know maybe from 1917. That who directed that? 1970? I know you remember that great movie from a couple years ago with like one camera shot the whole time, essentially. Anyway, Femme is a film about how do I describe? Nathan Stewart Jarrett is a drag queen or drag artist, and one day he's outside of his club, and it's just like, outside of the club, he like goes to the shop to like get some crisp or something, and George McKay was kind of looking at the drag club before from across the street, and then him and his friends follow Jules' character later and beat him up essentially. So then these months go by. Jules is like a shell of herself, of himself, and is like not going out, like stop, not really doing drag anymore. It's kind of just like, obviously the attack very much like messed him up, and then he goes to this like gay sauna like bathhouse type thing, sees George McKay's character there, who I forget what his name was in the film. I think Preston was his name. And again, we saw Preston across the street before the attack happened, looking at Jules' character while she was outside, like smoking a cigarette, and so he's in this gay sauna. Obviously, you knew from then, like he was looking at the drag bar. Obviously, you're not just standing around looking there for any reason. And then he's in this gay sauna essentially, and he can't recognize that this is the person because. Jules is not in the whole drag outfit. Jules looks how Jules like would look on a normal day, essentially. And they strike up a sexual relationship, and Jules is kind of thinking about, okay, like, how do I get revenge for this guy and expose that he's gay, maybe like record him somehow, or somehow just again like expose him, essentially. And they kind of like get to a place where they're more like connected, and Jules is still thinking about maybe how do I get this guy. At some point, Jules gets found out that she is this drag performer because she kind of goes back to it, and Preston's character gets invited to the club and like sees that he is this person who I beat up with my group of friends from before, and it's this kind of like whole falling out thing, and yeah, it's such a beautiful film to me because it's really showing like the angst of Jules' character, or like the pain of Jules' character who gets attacked, which so many people who are trans or who are gay or who are these things, they get attacked, and it's so horrible, and what that can do to somebody. But then like turning and trying to like maybe say, oh, I'm going to get them back. And then also on Preston's end as well, being this very obviously closeted gay man and not wanting to be himself. He's a very macho like toxic masculinity type man, and does not want to be seen with Jules, does not want anyone to think he's like anything of the sort. There's a scene where they're in Preston's apartment and some friends of his come back home early essentially, and he like is like, oh my gosh, and like Jules comes out and like puts on this like kind of bro voice and is kind of like, trying to be one of the guys, and he's like, Preston's like so ashamed and is just so closeted and just holding all that in. And so seeing the two of them kind of like be together and like eventually they kind of like blow up, I think it's such a interesting portrayal on screen. And again, one of those films that I feel like many people could like see themselves in either one of these characters if you either gay yourself or if you may be closeted potentially. And like, especially I feel like for men who are closeted, I feel like there's people who have this like, again, this toxic masculinity like idea in their head, and they like will not let themselves out, will not do all these things, or not let people in rather than let themselves out. Yeah, so I saw it and I've only seen it once, but I really enjoyed it, and it's one of those that I recommend people all the time. So that is Femme. All right, next one is interesting title here, but it's called How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. It is directed by Pat Boone-Pat. This is a film, essentially what the title suggests, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. This woman is dying, and her son, who's kind of like this aloof, is set in Thailand. The son who's kind of like this aloof, maybe not aloof's not the right word, but the son who, grandson rather, who doesn't have a job, doesn't really have a purpose in life. He's kind of just like around. He says a cousin of his, who's not, it's not her grandmother, but another cousin essentially. She like was a caretaker for her elderly grandparent towards the end, and she got this money essentially after they died because she was the one taking care of him or her, of him or her. And he said, "Oh, maybe I can do that for my grandma." So it starts off very bad because it's like obviously he's only there for the money, but it kind of quickly turns into a thing where he starts caring for her a lot more. He starts kind of like wanting to make sure she's well, and like her children are trying to interfere in terms of some things like getting her to maybe a home or like trying to make decisions for her. And he's like, "No, I know her and she can do this and I'm here for her." And so like I said, at first it starts off very sinister, like I'm just here for the money and trying to like do the bare minimum here, and like I don't really want to respect my grandmother or whatever. But then it turns into this thing where he like really like respects her and loves her and is protective over her and wants to take care of her, all these things. And it's a beautiful movie, and it made me think about my grandparents and being close to them, being protective over them, and just like loving them and things. And I thought it was a great film. Honestly, I didn't really have much more to say about it, but it was a great film, and that's really the story of it. And you might start off bad, but I guess you could turn around at the end. So that's a good part of it, definitely. All right, next movie is Inside Out 2, directed by Kelsey Mann. Inside Out, when I saw Inside Out, the first one from a couple years ago, I feel like Pixar, I haven't seen a bad Pixar movie. I think it's like impossible for them to make a bad movie. So obviously Inside Out 2, I'm so eager for it to come. We have new emotions coming in. If you haven't seen Inside Out, essentially it's like we're in the brain of Riley. The first movie she starts out as like a even younger person. In this movie, she's like 13, about to go into high school essentially. So these emotions in her head, we have joy, anger, sadness, disgust, and there's a fifth one as well, I think. I forget. And they're basically like controlling her brain, like, oh, we're going to be joyful right now, we're going to be angry right now, and it's like this whole thing. And it's very like cute movie, and kind of like way to, more than just cute, it's a way to like really see how emotions kind of work and how we're ebbing and flowing essentially in this time. It's very great. And I watched that one again right before seeing Inside Out 2, kind of like give myself a refresher. And Inside Out 2, we're starting with puberty. And you could see Inside Out 2 without seeing the first Inside Out. They kind of give a little bit of a synopsis, I believe, but I think it's best to see the first movie if you can. And Inside Out 2 is puberty. So we're bringing in anxiety, we're bringing in shyness, we're bringing in envy. All these things are coming in now and like taking over. They're like, it's a very dramatic way. It's very funny and very like on the nose. These people come in who are like just destroying the like control board. They pull out a control board. They give you this much more complex thing of buttons. They're like ripping up the studio essentially and just like messing everything up. And they're like, what's going on? Like the kind of like basic or plain emotions of joy, anger, sadness. You seeing these other kind of more complex emotions coming in and trying to like fight for Riley and say like, she wants to be with these friends. She's going to dump her old friends and meet the new friends. And like, she's going to a new school. There's all these kind of things. It's like a very wild ride. It's one of those similar to Dìdi. Like, we've been through puberty. We know what that period is like. And it's interesting to kind of see it like in the head, kind of going through the actions that Riley is doing. And it's so touching, and it's so like, yeah, it's it's one of those. I'm right. I was crying at the end because there's a scene where Joy, who was the main character, but I believe Amy Poehler voices Joy. Joy, if you look at the poster, she's the yellow one. Where Joy says something in the end, like, maybe you stop feeling so much joy when you get older, or something like that. And all these things she was saying at the end was just like, oh, it was like my eyes were starting to well. Inside Out 2, though. Like I said, Pixar does not miss. Pixar hits after hits. Love them. Inside Out was just, again, a really, really great movie. Alrighty. Next up, we have Nickel Boys, directed by Ramel Ross. This was a movie that I saw a couple weeks ago. Another one that I had been so eager to see. Anjou Ellis-Taylor is in this one as well. I read this book from Colson Whitehead, that's which won the Pulitzer. I read this book in 2020. It is my favorite book of Colson Whitehead's. He's won 2 Pulitzers, but this one is my favorite book of his. And is essentially about based off a true school, essentially, in Florida, that was like a reform school. And in this film and in the book, we're set in the 60s following 2 black students, essentially, who are not even students, pupils, who get sent to this reform school by kind of like different means in a way. And the reform school is like very messed up. It was actually found out after they were shut down, which again, this is based off a true school. They were like exhuming bodies out the back. Essentially, they were just killing boys off. Again, this was in the 60s in the Jim Crow South, so the black boys and the other like race of boys were like getting different treatment than some of the white boys, and it was just this horrible situation. Elwood is kind of the main character, like the one we start with, kind of in a sense, and then we while he's at the reform school, he meets who does he meet? He meets Turner. I forgot his name. He meets Turner, and Elwood, again, he got sent there kind of like as a miscarriage of justice, essentially, and he's kind of more optimistic about his future. He's more optimistic about getting out of there, and Turner is more like, let me give you some survival tips of how to like survive in this place. This place is messed up, and he kind of like, gives him like a more real take in a kind of sense. And Anjou Ellis-Taylor is playing Elwood's grandmother. So the movie is shot all in like first person, so it's like the actors like wore cameras, and like you're just seeing like what they're seeing, essentially. Like we don't actually see who Elwood is, like the actor, until Turner takes over, essentially, when he's at this reform school, and it's completely shot in that like first person point of view. So that's like an interesting way of doing it. And then also just in general, the story of it is so beautiful, so heartbreaking, because like I said, this is based on a true story, and you think about how many boys went through these schools for all these years and were just completely like mistreated. But it's an excellent movie. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it to everybody. Nickel Boys, and it's been one that's been getting the film has been getting a lot of like wins, a lot of nominations, and I think it's one that we will continue to see going around because it's, like I said, it's an excellent film. Excellent. All right, next one is Perfect Days, directed by Wim Wenders. It's spelled like, if you were to read it as like an American, it's like Wim Wenders, but he's German, so it's Wim Wenders. And this is a movie released in 2023 technically, but it didn't release in the United States until 2024. I saw it early January 2024, and it's a very quiet film. It stars Koji Yakuso as the main character. He's like a sanitation worker. He just goes about his everyday life. It's not a film with like tons and tons of dialogue, like more so like his colleague who worked with every cleaning. He like cleans these public toilets around Tokyo. He's the one doing a bunch of talking like throughout the day, like when they're at these places or other people in his life, but he's the person who lives on his own. He reads, he gets up in the morning, he like shaves, takes a shower, or goes to a bathhouse to take a bath, like in these public bathhouses. Or not public, but I think you like pay for them in the whole thing, but in the bathhouse essentially, with these other men. Separate though. I'm sounding crazy. Anyways, he's a very like just to himself guy, just doing what he's doing, and kind of just like he's very content with his life. He's very like sitting outside on his breaks, eating his lunch, looking at the trees. It's like this very beautiful. and he kind of starts having unexpected encounters and kind of like, I'm seeing, as I said here, finds beauty in the world. And it's one of those movies that when I saw it, I was just like, after it was over, I was just like, wow, like this is giving me thoughts about like being more content with things, how things are going for you, being more content with just like in life in general, and kind of like finding like the good parts of it, being able to like slow down and like really focus on and appreciate the things that are in your life that you really care and love. Yeah, and I also get used with watching it again. I've only seen it the once in full. Like I said, and I saw it back in January, so it's been like a year at this point. But yeah, it was a movie I really, really enjoyed when I watched it. And it was one of those that was easy to put on this list to share with you all. All right, next up on this list, we have Problemista, directed by Julio Torres, who also stars in the film. He also, I believe, he did write, definitely, but he also like produced this film. And this film also stars Tilda Swinton, who is fantastic. And I'm looking forward to seeing her. I'll be seeing her in The Room Next Door later this week. But yeah, Problemista is about Alejandro, who Julio Torres is playing. He's an aspiring toy designer from El Salvador, and he's struggling living in New York City. And essentially he like loses his job and has to like get a visa to stay in the country. And it's like, I have to like work on my feet to like figure out how I'm going to stay here and get a sponsor. So he starts working for Tilda Swinton, who's kind of like this like unreliable boss, and she's like very erratic. And he's like, can I trust this person? I need her to sign my visa paperwork. If I don't get this visa signed, I'm going to be kicked out soon. And it's this very kind of like, feel like real look at like everything is not like these sometimes I feel like people have a misconception of how like the immigration experience is. I don't necessarily know it, but I have people in my life who maybe been through it people who have been through it in different kind of ways. It's not all like rainbows, like, oh, you make it to the United States, you step on this soil and you're just like fine, they greet you with all these things. Like, there's so much stuff that has to be done of like, I fill out all this paperwork, maybe I don't have a bunch of money, how am I actually going to make it here, and like how am I going to like do what I need to do to like stay here, and how stressful it is, and how, especially for young people, I feel like how stressful it is to like stay on your feet and like find work, and like you can't be unemployed at all or you'll be kicked out in like a couple weeks or whatever. And it's like this very like beautiful movie, I feel like. And Julio Torres, I think he did a really great job with this film. Isabella Rossellini's in this film as well. I forget what capacity she's in this movie, but I see her name here, so I'm like, oh, it's Isabella from Conclave, she's in that. And it's also one that was released in 2023 technically, but didn't release in the States until 2024. Or I just happened to see it early 2024. I don't remember which is the case, but excellent movie by Julio Torres. Give that one a watch. All right, we're in the last days here, or the last couple here. Next up is Thelma, directed by Josh Margolin. This stars the lovely June Squibb and also Fred Heckinger. Richard Roundtree's in it as well. This is his last film he was in before he died, unfortunately. But this is a movie about June Squibb is playing a 93-year-old grandmother. Her name is Thelma Post. She gets duped or scammed by some people on the phone, essentially, and gives them all her money. And they're pretending essentially to be her grandson, who Fred Heckinger plays. And her kids are like, well, Mom, like, you messed up. There's nothing you could do. Like, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, like, I need to like get my money back. I don't want to be scammed by these people. And she's trying to like basically like go to the post office and like try to get her money back, or she starts there and she eventually like goes to the house to try to like, or this like business to try to like get her money from these scammers. And she like hops on this electric scooter. She steals it from Richard Roundtree, who was a friend of hers who was living in a home, which also her like daughter and her son-in-law are trying to like get her into a home. And she's like, no, like, I'm fine living on my own. I can take care of myself and whatever. And this whole ordeal of getting scammed on the phone is like another step to them to say like, okay, we need to put you like in this home. And she's like, no, I could do it. So she goes to Richard Roundtree's place at the home and steals his electric scooter and basically goes on this wild, well, they're together. They like break out of this place. They go on this wild goose chase trying to like make it. Richard Roundtree ends up like stops trying to help her essentially, and she goes on her own. And then her scooter gets stolen while she's out like in the bad side of town, and her grandson essentially comes in and helps her basically like as she gets to this place where she's seeing these people who scammed her, and she takes it back. And it's just very lovely movie about an old woman, like even though she's elderly, like not backing down. Like I still have it. I'm still fine up here. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. And also Fred Heckinger's character of the grandson being like, I'm here for my grandmother, and yeah, I might be kind of like doing my own thing right now. I'm not necessarily focused with what she wants to do, but I'm here and we're going to be a good team, and I'm worried about her and all these things. And it's like this really great movie, very funny movie as well, which was nice. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I saw this movie once. I don't remember when I saw it, but I saw it several months ago, and yeah, really, really a good one. A nice little funny, good family film, I feel like. All right, next one is Touch, directed by Bastarlar Kormaker. I'm probably going to mess that name up so bad. But this is a movie that is how do I describe? Sometimes I like struggle to describe, especially for movies that I haven't seen in a while. But it's kind of like a long lost love kind of film, maybe. We're seeing this young man who lives in Iceland, who he's reflecting on his time where he was at London School of Economics, where he fell in love with this Japanese woman while he was working at her father's like Japanese restaurant. And they get separated essentially. Like, I believe she got pregnant, and the dad like just like up and like made them leave, and he had no contact information for her, and he's a young lad at this point, and years later he like is still thinking about her. He's like, he goes back to the bar, to the restaurant, to try to see if she's there. It has changed at this point to be something else, and he's thinking about like, I want to find this woman who I love so much, who just disappeared overnight. I was never able to see her again, and she didn't say like she was leaving. Like, there was this moment where she was about to say, and then she just like maybe couldn't bring herself to do it, and she didn't say, and they kind of said goodbye. And like in a lot of ways, sometimes you say goodbye when you're in a relationship potentially, and he's on this thing of his whole life essentially. You can tell he like never let her go, or he's still like thinking about her, and he's in this place now where he's like, he has a daughter, he's living by himself, he's an older gentleman at this point, but he's thinking about this girlfriend from Japan. So he like tracks his steps back from London, ends up in Japan, and goes to meet her. It's actually like he meets her in the COVID pandemic. Like, she has COVID at the moment, and it's kind of an interesting twist, but it's like 50 years later he finally finds her again. It's this beautiful movie. Like, he just is basically on this quest to find her. So it's like going back and forth between him currently, like set in like 2020, like him in the airport wearing a mask and like doing the whole thing, and his daughter like, why are you going to London right now? There's a pandemic. Stay like in Iceland. Like, this is scary. And he's like, no, I have to do something. So it's going between that period and also going back to like him going to school there, him meeting her at the restaurant, him working and like making friends at the restaurant, doing the whole thing, and then up until she leaves. And yeah, I really, really like this movie. Definitely a strong favorite of mine. All right, we made it through all these movies. We have one more left. Thanks for hanging on this long. This one, again, alphabetical order here, so this is the last one of the list, is Wicked, directed by John M. Chu. So this movie, I've seen it 3 times in the theaters. I knew nothing. I was never a part of the Wicked lore, any of this Wicked stuff. I'd seen The Wizard of Oz, or I thought I had seen The Wizard of Oz like years and years ago. Like, not even necessarily a memory. Same with The Wiz, never necessarily a memory. So I knew that there was like a connection to The Wizard of Oz, obviously, with Wicked. But knowing this movie was coming up, myself and my sister, we were like, oh, we should go see the musical on Broadway. Let's go see it. We want to see it before the movie comes out, essentially. So we went to go do that. We did that Labor Day weekend, which is like first week of September. We went that weekend and saw it, and again, not knowing anything about the storyline, not knowing anything about other than there's a green girl. Didn't know anything about it. Saw the Broadway play and the Broadway musical and absolutely like loved it. So this is so funny. Glinda's character is so funny. I forget the person of the name who's on Broadway currently, but she was so fantastic, and I can imagine a bunch of other ones have been really great too. So that was really, ever since seeing the musical, got me more excited. Like, okay, the movie's coming in November. Like, let's get ready to see the movie. And the movie was great. It stars Cynthia Riva as Elphaba, Ariana Grande as Glinda. Ariana Grande is a big pop star who I've I've followed her and I've seen since long ago when she was on Nickelodeon. So we have obviously have known her for a while. And Cynthia Erivo I had known. A lot of people have just met Cynthia Erivo because of Wicked, but I've known Cynthia from The Color Purple, from she was in Harriet. She's done a lot of great stuff. She's an ultra talented person. So I was so excited to see the movie, and the movie was really great. And this is Wicked. This is only like part 1. So part 2 is coming out like the same time next year, around Thanksgiving time, end of November. So we look forward to part 2. But since I've seen the Broadway play now, the musical now, I obviously know what happens. Most people know what happens because they've seen the musical or they've read things or they just know like what's going on. So it's not necessarily a spoiler thing here, but the movie kind of happens with Galinda and Elphaba end up getting paired as roommates at Shiz University. Galinda's this very popular girl. She has the whole song Popular. And Elphaba is green and is an outcast, and people don't like her, and they end up forming this friendship. And Elphaba's a very talented witch, which some of those things, like, I remember in the movie when they were doing some of the, like, the sorcery, like, I was just, like, in the movie, like, that's not my vibe at all. Probably a reason why I wasn't, like, watching Wicked when I was, like, or seeing Wicked stuff when I was a child. But that stuff was going on. So Elphaba's a talented witch, essentially. Even saying that makes me a little bit like me. And she gets basically taken advantage of because they want her to, like, they want to use her for their twisted schemes to, like, shut the animals up, essentially. In this kind of world, the animals can speak. They're very, like, learned. They're very, like, with it. And they're trying to, like, shut them down and kind of blame them for, like, this drought that they're going through and all these things. It's, like, kind of crazy. So there's so many, like, meanings in the movie, and you can, like, replace, oh, we're trying to silence the animals, or we're trying to blame the animals for everything, or animals should be seen and not heard, which is written on Dr. Dillamond's, who Peter Dinklage plays. He's a goat, a professor. Not a goat, not like Greatest of All Time. He's a goat. He's a professor. So if you substitute animals, or animals should be seen and not heard, substitute that for something else actually happening in the real world, and be like, why is this, like, there's so many things with it, and it's one of those movies, like I said, like, you could think about whatever you're talking about in the movie, sure, but you can think about real life things and how, like, why are they always the scapegoat for certain things, or why is this happening, why is that happening? So it's a very great movie in terms of all those themes. They're very, like, relevant today, I'm sure, as they were when the musical just first premiered and the book premiered and all these things, or was published and all these things. So great. And on top of it, the singing is fantastic. My favorite of the soundtrack is The Wizard and I, definitely. It was, like, my top song, I believe, for December 2024 on my Apple Music. I was just listening to it all the time. It's so good. Stephen Schwartz, who did the music for the musical, was on board for the movie, so they added a couple things, I think, maybe a couple of lines and things like that, really special. Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth made a cameo appearance in the movie, which was a surprise for everybody. That was, like, nice to see them. They were the original Galinda and Elphaba on Broadway back, like, 20-some years ago. So yeah, just a really great movie to see. I've seen it 3 times in theaters, like I said. I look forward to the second one. I'll be seated there with my cousins. My cousins and I, we saw it. That was the 3rd time I saw it. We saw it when we were all home for Thanksgiving. And we said, okay, well, this time next year we'll do the same thing again. So I look forward to seeing it with them next year, or later this year, rather, and going through the whole thing again with the family. So yeah, that is my list of movies of 2024. This video went longer than I thought it was going to be, and maybe I'll see if I can trim some of the fat. But I don't know. I was just looking forward to talking about all these movies. As I said, 1-minute movie reviews are not enough for some of my favorite ones. So it's nice to be able to kind of talk a little longer about each of these movies. Have you seen any of these movies? What have you thought about any of them, if you've seen them? Any ones you haven't seen that you want to see now that maybe you've watched this? Or just tell me what are your favorite movies for 2024. I do have some, like, maybe honorable mentions, but I won't mention them here because this video is going on way too long. But yeah, so let me know. Have you seen these movies? What do you think? What are your movies you like this year? What are you looking for coming out in 2025? All the things. If you have any, like, award predictions, hit me up with those. We'll talk about some more award season stuff as we continue to kind of go along here. But yeah, thanks for being here for this almost 55-minute video. It might not be as much as I trim some things. We'll see. But yeah, again, thanks so much. I'll catch you guys in my next video about who knows what. But, we are here Aaliyah Langley on YouTube. Obviously, you know where to find me because I'm here now. I'm just diddling on and talking. I need to end this video. So I'm going to end it now. All right, goodbye.